All right, y'all. So we have talked about the triumph of science. We've identified thermodynamics into chemistry, into power, electricity, and petroleum. We've talked about how the triumph of science really occurred because of the acceptance of the material world over supernatural forces. And additionally, we saw the success and triumph into the second industrial revolution. And once the second industrial revolution really proves this concept of progress, this allows for the development of things like evolution to be developed because people now have a sense of doubt that's going to be applicable throughout. And this really leads us to the development of sociology. You might be saying, hey, Watts, McKay has something else there. I'm going to include it here because Herbert Spencer is a sociologist, so I'm hoping that makes sense. Might jack up your notes a little bit, but I think you can fix them. But with the development of sociology, intellectuals were drawn to sociology as the nature of man seemed to have been transformed by modernity. The idea that mankind, we've transitioned from a rural community mindset into this rabid individualism. And they wanted to know what caused it and what were the consequences. Rather than people gaining fulfillment through community, metropolitan areas saw increased depression, isolationism, and loneliness. Auguste Comte, this kind of connects us back to positivism. Auguste Comte, he's the father of sociology, and he really, his works are really about how this new transformation, pulling us away from the religious mindset, can really impact mankind and what would happen. He was writing this at the beginning of all this, so he doesn't have the same conclusions as some of the other guys. And this guy named Tony's probably misenunciating his name. I like him because he lamented that Western civilization had transformed from community to society. I like that drawing because community is tightly woven, a sense of connectivity, togetherness. This concept of society, it's the idea that we're a bunch of individuals competing. In some ways, Tony says even arguing the idea that we're going from humanity to animalism, that those animal instincts, the idea of how we compete against each other. And that's going to lead us right to social Darwinism. This is the sociological application of Darwin. And in Herbert Spencer's book called Social Statics, I would definitely write that down. It gives us a detail to argue. But Herbert Spencer really viewed societies as evolving bodies. He believed he's witnessing during this time period the changes in nature of Germany and Italy, the changing nature of Great Britain and France, and he's drawing these conclusions that really, as independent humans had fought through the past, is now conforming into these societies, and these societies are always evolving. And by the 1870s, he argued that only the fittest survived. You know, I think the best comparison here would be Germany versus Burgundy. I think if you remember, Burgundy was a independent medieval kingdom in the 1400s. It was absorbed by France because the leader died and the society itself couldn't sustain itself, so it was absorbed into France. So Burgundy was not fit, so therefore it became a part of another. Where in contrast, by 1871, Germany becomes an independent country under the leadership of Prussia. They're the strong. They've evolved. They went through the wars of religion, the 30 Years' War, and the wars of Austrian succession, 7 Years' War, as well as the wars of Napoleon. And yet the German people have remained together to form. So therefore the strong survive while the weak kind of are gone. So this is really kind of, again, a very different view. And this, unfortunately, is going to become part of that 19th century racism. When we talk about the Enlightenment, we talk about the advent of biological racism, how that social construct was created to presuppose or European supremacy. We're going to find out that now this is going to evolve later into Aryanism. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, this is a sociological application Herbert Spencer's making observations of what he thinks is the natural patterns. Strong survive, weak fell. Now, other parts of sociology, Max Weber's The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, 1890. Max Weber he reflected on why was Western Europe superior to anywhere else. Make sure you hear me again. Max Weber was wondering, why was Western Europe, superior to everywhere else? Right there kind of tells you that instead of objectively looking, he has an idea of what's happened and he wants to know how it occurred. And from that framework, he drew a conclusion that the Protestant Revolution was responsible for the birth of capitalism. Not just Protestantism, specifically Calvinism. The idea of the elect, the work ethic, and he really argued this, and it becomes a really important part of the history of the Reformation, as well as the sociological understanding. Again, very interested. Make sure you recognize that. Max Weber's The Protestant Ethic. And then we have Durkheim's Suicide. It's 1897. Again, he is looking at the idea of why is there an uptick of suicides. And I think it's important for us to recognize, as we're in the late 19th century, we're in the midst of modernity. There's people amazed by all the progress that's going around. Yet, why was the suicide rate increasing? And Durkheim drew that conclusion, the idea, the loss of self, the loss of individual connection to society really led to a sense of despair. And again, go back to the read, check that out, really important. And lastly, we see Le Bon's The Crowd. I find this really fascinating as we can connect this maybe to even what's happening. We saw that in the 20th century with the Mussolini as well as Hitler. It's almost as if Le Bon's like this magician who's predicting the future. But we're going to find out, instead of looking into the future, Le Bon's actually studying what happened right before then. From 1850 to 1870, a guy named Napoleon III will convince all of France, all of the crowd, if you will, chaotic crowd, a crowd that was looking for meaning. Napoleon III promised greatness. Elect me and we'll become great. And that allowed for the democracy to collapse and Napoleon III to become an emperor. So yes, he's looking into the 20th century, but he's borrowing from his recent history. And that idea of a crowd, he was studying crowd dynamics and what makes a cult of personality. So as we conclude here, what is this triumph? This triumph of science meant Europeans accepted the material mechanical view of the universe. No longer are they attached to Christianity as the sole intellectual framework. A new view of humanity developed through Darwinism and sociology. The idea that we're nothing more than animals, and that as animals we can be studied within our environment. We also see that instead of the artists and poets becoming celebrities, it's going to be the late 19th century scientists. Michael Faraday actually traveled to the United States and had several sellout crowds who really wanted to talk about electromagnetics. Totally crazy to me, something I know I want to be interested in, but that was the age. The scientists were magnificent, if you will. And as we're seeing this, we're seeing a materialistic world really form. I hope that makes sense to you guys. This is going to conclude the triumph of science. We are now going to maneuver ourselves to realism.